All right, everybody. So I assume that there'll be some people kind of coming in here in a few minutes as time goes on, but we'll get a few right off the bat. I just wanted to go through a lot of cool things that are going on with Mormon Discussion Podcast. Not sure exactly why there's a little black spot on that red part of the logo there on the left. I was working on that this morning. Can't figure out that. But wanted to go over a bunch of stuff for the year and just wanted to talk to you about things that are happening so that you knew all the cool stuff that we were doing and how to access all of it. We are putting out a ton of podcasts right now, bunches and bunches of them. And I want to just kind of give each of them a chance to get some screen time and you can see what all we're doing. 2021 was a big year for us, and 2022 is off to an exciting start. As the executive director for Mormon Discussion Incorporated, I wanted to do a live conversation today and talk to you about all the cool things that are happening. Let's start off with the Newish. I'm saying Newish because they were added at the second half of last year. And so I'll share the screen here and we can talk about each of those. Just so you know, the umbrella site to get everything is at mormondiscussions.org. And you can go up here. We've got to update some of this. I haven't done some of that in a long time, but down below, again, I'll put this in the comments as well so that you have it. Mormon Discussions, plural.org is where all of our, it's kind of a landing page. It's where all of our sites are somewhat hosted. Like you could click the site and go to it. So for instance, Mormon Discussion, my original podcast, which is now under the URL of mdpodcast.org. And you've got Radio Free Mormon, Almost Awakened, Mormonism Live. We'll talk about some of these other ones that are newer, but you can access each of them. And then the very end, you've got the Mormon Primer and the Umbrella site. The Umbrella site is where all of the audio is housed. So you can click there and go to everything that we're putting out should be located all in one place. And you can access every podcast separately as well. So you get each one of these, you could go to it. So for instance, Radio Free Mormon takes you right to Radio Free Mormon, and you've got all of his work there. But again, all of that can be accessed from Mormon Discussions, plural with an S on the end there, .org. Also down below, we have our podcast host. We are missing a couple. They are folks who want to be more anonymous, and so I still have to figure out exactly how they want it to appear. But for the most part, all of our active podcasters are listed there. So when I say Newish Podcast, the ones that were added last year, we have the Backyard Professor, backyardprofessor.org, and Kerry Schertz, who used to be an apologist with Fair Mormon. He was one of the original folks with, I believe, Farms. And eventually he read enough to figure out that Mormonism wasn't what it claimed to be. And in the last year, we've reached out to Kerry and given him a chance after a decade or two of not really speaking much on Mormonism to come on and to start podcasting and to be able to share his journey and his views on this side of life compared to the things he said or shared from inside the church as one of its apologists. And so we're really proud to have Kerry Schertz in our umbrella. And so that's backyardprofessor.org. One of the other new ones that we added last year was Rameumptum Ruminations. This is hosted by Scott, and fantastic podcast as well. We are really proud of the material that he is putting out. And by the way, just an FYI, there's questions up here. We can put these up. If you ever want to donate to one specific podcast, is that something we can do? Absolutely. Every one of these podcasters have their own website, and off to the right on any one of these websites is a donation screen. That donation link there is specific to their podcast. So if I were to donate right now $10 on a recurring monthly donation and go to next, what I'm going to end up with here is this is just Scott's podcast, Rameumptum Ruminations, and they get a majority portion of that. Again, the first year folks podcast with us, they don't get paid. That's just the space that we're in. I didn't make money the first year. It took me years and years to build it. We take care of all the upfront cost of each of our podcasters, and they sign an agreement that for the first year, they don't get paid. From year 2 on, they get paid a significant portion of what comes into them through donations. And the way you see that Rameumptum Ruminations gets a donation from you is to go to his site, rameumptumruminations.org, or any of the others, backyardprofessor.org, MD Podcast, Radio Free Mormon, and then donate on their site, and that money goes directly to their podcast. And we want, even the new podcasters, we want you folks donating to them, because then when they start in year 2, they automatically right off the start will have money coming in that will go to them. So Rameumptum Ruminations, we are super proud of the work that he is putting out as well. And we took on that last year. Beginning of this, actually it was the end of last year, we had a conversation where we didn't feel like we had a lot of female representation in our podcast umbrella, both in our board of directors as well as in our podcasts. And so in the very beginning of 2022, we gave an opportunity at the end of 2021 for multiple women who had an interest in podcasting to work with us to develop a podcast. And we went ahead and offered 3 of those women a chance. And we essentially offered every woman who pursued the opportunity a chance. And there was one that was past the deadline that I said, we'll have to catch the next time around, because there was a bunch of work going into the ones that we did take on. But the 3 women who pursued the opportunity, there were originally like 15 or 16 women who reached out, and there were essentially, and there was an exception, which we'll get to, but there were actually 2 exceptions, but there were 3 women who pursued the opportunity, and we offered all 3 of them an opportunity to podcast under our umbrella. The first one is Where Will You Go? This is hosted by a woman named Marty. So wherewillyougo.net. So this is the only podcast we have under our umbrella that ends in .net, simply because of URL names and who owned them. This one was available, and so this is what we have. By the way, feel free to ask questions about anything, and happy to answer stuff as we go along. And so there's that. Awesome, Tisha. That's very helpful. If you'll reach out to me on Facebook Messenger, Tisha is offering to help with some of the tech support of their shows. I would love that. If you'll just Facebook message me, I will add you into our list of people who can assist us with things. That'd be very helpful. Thank you. Wherewillyougo.net. And I think she's got a great concept. Marty sits down with people and has conversations, both believers inside, all the way from orthodoxy to significant nuance, to folks who are outside of the church. And she's just trying to facilitate conversations where people get to share their story, why they feel the way they do, why they stay, why they went, and what they're doing either inside or outside. In other words, how their heart is connecting with their mind and connecting with their outward behavior. And her hope is that we can just create kind of a table that people can have a seat at, and we can all just hear each other, folks who still believe, folks who have lost belief. And I think the concept is beautiful, and I think the episodes that have come out so far have been fantastic. And by the way, every one of these podcasts, we'll talk about our YouTube channel later, but every one of these podcasts is getting like a 94 to 97% upvote. And that says a lot. I mean, there are other channels, for instance, I'll just say Midnight Mormons, who often turn their comments off and turn their likes off so that they can't get hammered with downvotes or negative comments. We've never done that. And at least to date, our essentially approval rating has been 94 to 97% across the board on all of these podcasts. I think they're fantastic. So wherewillyougo.net. Check it out. She's got an interview up there with Jana Spangler, Jacob Hansen, John Vervaeke, who is a well-known person outside of Mormonism. And she just has conversations with people, and those conversations seem to be very productive. So great place to go. We just are getting this one off the ground. It is She Became Visible, hosted by Renee Steelman. And I'm super excited for the work that is coming. She's already done an interview on 21st Century Saints that we have posted, and you can hear the trailer there. And I believe she just sent me an episode last night. So I'm hoping in the next 24 to 48 hours, I'll get that up on her site. But she is beginning to take off here with hers. That is shebecamevisible.org. Just FYI. The next one is a podcast titled Dissident Daughters, and it's hosted by two women. They are somewhat anonymous, so I will stay away from names here, but I do think they go by the names of Ada, and I should have checked this before I meant to, and I just don't have it in my notes. Ada is one of them, and it's two women who are having conversations, essentially talking about the female perspective on the deconstruction side of Mormonism and post-Mormonism. And so they've already got an episode, the Great and Spacious episode. Let's talk about sex, parenting after Mormonism, and then their first episode, an introduction. So they've got 4 up there. And most of this stuff is also available on our YouTube channel as well. So there is that. Okay, so dissidentdaughters.org, and I think their material is also fantastic. We adopted a podcast that had been, and I'm going to say the words I'm proud a ton, because all of this stuff is just going so well. It's Esther. Thank you, by the way, on Dissident Daughters, Ada and Esther. And that's the names for the two women that are doing that podcast. And I thank you for that. Again, I'm sorry to them for getting one of those and not having it written down. But this podcast, we essentially merged under our umbrella. It's an existing podcast. It's been out a year, and I'd never heard of it. And when Brittany Hartley and I were preparing to do an episode on the Almost Awakened podcast for On Consent, Brittany had caught wind of this one and had sent me one of Terry Hales, who's the host of it. Emancipate Your Mind is the name of the podcast. Brittany Hartley had shared with me an episode that Terry Hales had done on consent, and the episode was brilliant, so good. And I really enjoyed it, and it really helped us formulate a section that I don't think I had planned to go into on consent within a religious paradigm. I had planned to talk about legal consent within medical research, medical treatment, and sexual consent and consent generally. But this episode was so impactful to us that we did a section on religious consent and spoke at length on that. Terry Hale's Emancipate Your Mind, I've gone on to listen to 5, 6, 7 other episodes. The podcast is amazing. So I reached out to Terry to thank her for the work that she was doing and to let her know that one of her episodes had a huge impact on our Almost Awakened podcast. And I asked her, I said, how many downloads are you getting per episode? And she told me the number, and it was significantly lower than her podcast deserves. And I think it's simply because it's an unknown podcast out there. And so once I heard what her numbers were, I said, Terry, I think if you're willing to consider coming under our umbrella, I think we can increase your listens and downloads exponentially. And I think we can provide you an arena which you can flourish and grow and we worked out over the next week or so through conversations, answering questions for her and helping her understand what we would be and not be for her. And we made, she made the decision to join with Mormon Discussion Incorporated. And so now on our YouTube channel, also on her site, which will be emancipateyourmind.org. And so you can go onto any third-party app. You can find her, you can subscribe, or if you're subscribed to the Umbrella site, you'll see her podcast episodes drop. We just got a really cool comment, by the way. Somebody said, I was really disappointed to see 55 episodes of some unknown podcast just drop on your Umbrella. And the person seemed a little frustrated on the front end that suddenly these 55 episodes of a podcast they had never heard of were kind of clustering up their podcast app. So they gave it a listen. And last I heard, they were on episode 21, binge listening to it. And her podcast, I would suggest to everyone here, if you want to deal with the religious indoctrination and unhealthy mechanisms that were applied to you within religion, and now you want to deconstruct those and show up on this side of life, having the tools and resources to process all of that and to come out making peace with it and to take a healthy approach to life, I would deeply suggest you start listening to Emancipate Your Mind, emancipateyourmind.org. And Terry, the host of this, see if I can find here. She is a certified religious transition and trauma recovery coach, and she knows what she's talking about. She is, you can tell by the way she articulates the things that she speaks on, that she is experienced both and educated. And those two things are two separate things, and she has both of them nailed. Anyway, she does a great job. She talks about each Sunday, she explores different perspectives on subconscious beliefs that we've taken for granted as truth in high demand religions, and returns the authority to you to decide what serves your highest, most fulfilling life. And then she talks about where you can follow her and get coaching. I'm just telling you, man, I am super honored to have found this and lucky to have found it. And to have Terry join forces with us, and so proud of her work. She's up to, I think, episode 57. And just so you know, there are tons of comments coming on. That's awesome. I'm binge listening too. Emancipate is good stuff. I listened to an episode this week and I loved it. We'll definitely listen to more. Her stuff is really good. And so Emancipate Your Mind is one. And then just kind of a side note, let's go to home here. I think that was the home page. We've been doing the Almost Awakened podcast for a couple of years. We started off with a co-host, Mikkel. I really love Mikkel. She was awesome, but she stepped away from Almost Awakened. And I'd been doing the podcast myself. It gave me a chance to have this space where I could just talk about the things that were on my mind in a second half of life. And so if I read a good book, or I was working on something inside of me to become a better person in the world, I was really working hard to make this podcast be vibrant and to make it be a space where we could talk about second half of life things. The podcast never really grew much, and it really didn't take off the way I'd hoped it would. And when we were working with women to elevate female voices within our entity, Brittany Hartley, who's a good friend of mine, she and I have known each other since I started podcasting back in 2012. She was one of the very first listeners to Mormon Discussion Podcast. And we interviewed her early on. And over the years, we've maintained a really solid friendship. And I'm super proud of all the work that she has done to be educated and certified in various facets. And she was going to start her own podcast. And I said, Britt, I think there's a lot of overlap in what you want to bring to the table and what I'm doing with Almost Awakened. And to be honest, I think I need a co-host. And Britt also got feedback when she put out her test episode that she was great, but that it seemed like she needed a co-host to kind of help facilitate these conversations. And so Brittany Hartley and I got together, and we brought her on board as co-host of the Almost Awakened podcast. And she has helped us a bunch. including revamping our logo, which is, I think, much tighter, much better. We're loving it. She's brought kind of the intro music to us. And if you go listen to, I'll just give an example. We did an episode recently called The Hero's Journey. And if you want to sit down and let's just listen to a great conversation, I think Britt and I talking about Joseph Campbell in The Hero's Journey is just fantastic. And our goal in this podcast is to just bring various voices from wisdom traditions in and out of religion, to bring the best of science and psychology, to bring the best scholarship. And our hope is that we will give you conversations that aren't directly connected to Mormonism, that we'll be having conversations that maybe use Mormonism here or there as a sprinkling, but that for the most part, we're providing you a podcast that is very much second half of life stuff. And if I can suggest, go listen to the episode on consent. Once you understand consent from a non-Mormon view, you can start to move through the world much healthier in all the things that you do. We interviewed Bart Campolo, who is a very well-known deconstructed Christian who's left Christianity and now is a humanist and has his own very popular podcast, Humanize Me. We did 2 episodes with him. So there'll be times where I talk on my own, Britt talks on her own, sometimes where Britt and I are talking together, such as The Hero's Journey. And I think there will also be a bunch of interviews with experts and intelligent, articulate people, both in our community within Mormonism, as well as people who are outside Mormonism completely, like Bart Campolo. Recently, we just interviewed David Peck and Phil McLemore. Both of those folks have a history within Mormonism, but they brought to us a conversation that I think was just really deep and beautiful outside of Mormonism. And so the Almost Awakened podcast, again, you can donate to Almost Awakened, and that tracks it just to the Almost Awakened podcast. And then I wanted to talk about our YouTube channel. I would suggest everybody subscribe here. This is where Mormonism Live, its live shows are happening. You're also going to see other live programs such as The Backyard Professor, Carrie Schertz, who's come on several times, for instance, talking about the Book of Abraham and other things that he finds interesting. Also, all of our non-live content is on YouTube as well, most of it. We still have to go back and put some old Radio Free Mormon episodes up, some old Mormon discussion episodes up, but the ones that were most popular should be already up there. Marriage on a Tightrope, all of their episodes are on YouTube. If you just, let's do something here. Let's go back, and I'm going to go incognito for just a second so that we can see this as somebody who's on the YouTube channel for the first time. So you would want to join and subscribe. Join allows you to participate in the conversations. And you'll notice that if you join, like whenever we do Mormonism Live on Wednesdays at 6:20 p.m., that you can make comments, you can participate. Subscribe allows you to be notified when new things are coming on. And it gives us an ability to kind of track new people who are showing up at our YouTube channel to listen to content. So if I can suggest, it's youtube.com/C by itself for channel C / Mormon Discussions with an S on the end, INC. Again, I'll be a little confusing. I've done this and I shouldn't have probably over time, but we are Mormon Discussion Incorporated. But because we now have multiple podcasts under us, we want to convey that we have lots more than just one discussion going. So Mormon Discussions with an S on the end, INC. That will take you to the YouTube channel. Join and subscribe today. We would love that if you did that. Now, I'm going to go back to the umbrella site and share a few other things with you. Financials. We are trying as best we can. Again, anybody can point out where we're short. I try to be completely transparent. myself and our board of directors feels that is crucial to what we're doing. So on the umbrella site, which is Mormon Discussion Podcast.org, that's the original URL that we podcasted under. Let me log in here for just a moment. As well as the umbrella landing page, which we were at here. Let me go to visit site. On the top of both of these, you get nonprofit financials. And 2014 through 2018, we brought in less than $50,000 a year. When that happens, the IRS doesn't really require you to do anything other than to fill out a little 990 postcard called a 990N, I believe. And you essentially just mark on that postcard that, hey, we followed all the rules. We did everything we're supposed to do. Let's move on to the next year. Once we got to above 50,000 in donations, you had to start doing a 990 easy and then eventually the regular 990 form. So 2014 to 2018, the best I've got here, because it was so simplified, is I've got 2014, 2015, 2016's financials up there. Unfortunately, 2017 and 2018, I do not have there, but 2019 was the first year we took in more than $50,000. And each year I try to give a synopsis of the things that happened that I think a person would want to know if they are looking for transparency and want to know how the entity is doing. 2019, 2020, you can just click the tax filing and you can go right to our tax form. It is right there on our website for you to view. We're not ashamed of anything that we're doing, and we are proud of the work that is going on. And so you can find it here, 220 tax filing 990E, and you can get that one. 2021 is not up yet because while it is completed, we are waiting for the IRS to give us the go ahead to send it into them. We're just waiting for a PIN number or something back from them. The accountant will let me know as soon as that was accepted. And as soon as that's done, 2021 will also be linked here as soon as we have it. Just FYI, last year my salary was $45,000. And at the end of 2021, the year before, I think it was $15,000. And then 2021, at the end of the year, the board agreed to give me a salary of $65,000. And that allowed me, by the way, that's incredible. And that allowed me to go part-time at Family Pawn. I now work 2 to 3 days a week, and usually it's 2. And it gives me the chance to be home and to work a lot more on content. And to help these women get their websites started, to be able to take all this content from Emancipate Your Mind, Terry Hale's podcast, and put it up on YouTube and on her site. It's really allowed me to have the time to dedicate essentially a full-time job to doing this. It was always difficult balancing everything, and I now feel like I have some free time and life is going really good. And so I just really appreciate the donations that you folks make. And we raised $250,000 last year, and that sounds like a lot, and it is. But when you have this plan in place to pay multiple podcasters to create content, when you have an executive director who needs to run this thing as a business, and Radio Free Mormon is our best podcast in terms of money that comes in and him being paid, and he is a lawyer who made a good income to begin with, and we're trying to make it possible for him to reduce his work schedule a little bit so that he can focus more on creating content for us. And so when you divide out over all the overhead, all the pay to folks, and we do have a savings account and we have saved money. And as you all know, the world is a very fragile place. And a recession, or even worse, a depression, would deeply hurt us because donations are expendable income. And those are the first things that people cut back on. So I hope as people see the amount we bring in, I hope you know that we're being responsible with it. And we do want to accumulate a bit of a savings account for a rainy day fund. By the way, if you Google how to run a nonprofit, almost every place wants you to do that. That good education towards nonprofits is you need to have a rainy day fund. And so I'm always trying to explain, like, hey, we bring some money in, but we're trying to use it wisely. And I hope that folks will continue to donate. And folks who haven't donated in the past, I would hope that you might at some point consider it, because it's how we survive. I don't get paid, by the way, for any of the content I create. I get the salary of $65,000, but the work of creating podcast material such as Almost Awakened, Mormonism Live, and creating an episode every now and then for other podcasts that I have, Mormon Discussion, Cognitive Dissidence, Mythical Jesus podcasts are all ones that have material, and I hope to continue to create material from time to time. I don't get paid for any of that. There's no extra money given. We do rent out my office here, but it's $200 a month. And this office is used exclusively for Mormon discussion. Okay. So financial transparency, you can go on and you can see any of the synopsis of things that happened, the years that it was, and other than 2021, you can go and look at all of our tax returns. So there's that. We added Maven this year. So one of the things, there was a significant donor who came in at the end of 2021 and wanted to support the podcast in a significant way. And that, first off, thank you very much to that person. One of the things it's allowed us to do is to bring some extra help on. And so we brought Maven on to be the show manager for Mormonism Live. By the way, I should note that one because it is a somewhat newish podcast, but we do a live show. Excuse me. We do a live show on Wednesdays at 6:20 p.m. and you can go to mormonismlive.org. This is the show that brings in the second largest amount of money under our umbrella. And it's co-hosted by myself and Radio Free Mormon. And there's the interview with Maven. But we'd love to have you check us out at 6:20 p.m. on Wednesdays. Best place to watch it would be YouTube. And again, just appreciate everybody who donates to our podcast umbrella. And again, you pick where your money goes. If you like the Dissident Daughters podcast more than the others, send them $10 a month. If you like Marriage on a Tightrope, and I want to just put a plug in for them, by the way. Marriage on a Tightrope has a pretty significant following, and they've got a Facebook group, and their work is really to help mixed faith marriages. Katie is, as far as I can tell, more of a believer, and Alan, I think it's pretty obvious from his TikToks and other places that he comes from a very non-believing perspective. And the two of them work together to provide a platform to essentially help mixed faith marriages negotiate within that relationship to be able to make it and to help them see that it can be done. Marriage on a Tightrope brings in very little in donations. New donations this year, by the way, $104. And it really surprises me. I would have expected mixed faith couples whose marriages benefited and maybe even were saved by the work that Katie and Alan do. I would have thought that it would have brought in more. And so if I can just say to anyone who listens to this podcast, review of the entity, if Marriage on a Tightrope has had any impact on you at all, would you please go to marriageonatightrope.org, and you can click the donate button at the top. Every one of the websites has a donate button at the top. Or you can just on the right-hand side start to fill out that form and click next. It would mean a lot to me if we could get them. I think they made somewhere around $8,000 or $9,000 last year. And it would be really beautiful to me if we could get them to making about $20,000 at least. And the trouble with podcasting is most podcasts don't make money, and the podcasters in a year, 2, 3 burn out. And you just don't get their content. And so I would really appreciate it very much if folks could make a donation to Marriage on a Tightrope if it's had an impact on you and if you feel inclined. So there's that. Let me check the comments here. My absolute fave. So somebody said, hope you guys are taking extra care of Maven. She's gold. We do pay Maven. And I think we pay her well. We've set out, we have an agreed number of hours that she would spend on helping us. And we've agreed on an amount to pay her to do that. And so we pay her for those hours. And I think she's paid well for those. You'd have to ask her, but I'm not afraid of you asking her the question by any means. Backyard Professor is also on fire. Love Backyard Professor's Sunday podcast. Marriage on a Tightrope is not an inviting title for a podcast. Needs something like Mixed Faith Unity. I think all of our marriages sometimes are on a tightrope. And I think marriage is difficult and relationships are hard. And I think for what Alan and Katie do, I think Marriage on a Tightrope is the perfect name. But I understand your constructive criticism, and I think it's of value, and thank you for sharing that. I'm really proud of the work that they do, and I hope that people will check out their podcast and that we can get their donations up. All right. Let's talk about the podcast feeds. So if you were to go onto iTunes or Stitcher or Podcatcher, Google Play, I think Amazon Music now hosts all these podcasts. You could search for any of these podcasts on their own. So you could type in Mormon Discussion. You could type in Radio Free Mormon, Almost Awakened, Mormonism Live, Emancipate Your Mind, Marriage on a Tightrope, Cognitive Dissonance, Rameumptum Ruminations, Mythical Jesus, Backyard Professor, Where Will You Go, Dissident Daughters, and She Became Visible. And I don't think I'm missing anything, but there might be one missing. And you can go on and type any one of those in, type any one of those into your podcast app, and it should show up. By the way, I would love feedback. If you're not finding one of these podcasts on one of those platforms, please say something to me. It's an easy fix. It just is an oversight by me, and I want to make sure we get that corrected. We want to give all these podcasters as much exposure as possible. So if you don't see a podcast somewhere, please say so. If you have any trouble at all trying to connect to one of these, please let me know. You can connect to any of these separately. So if you just want to listen to Backyard Professor, you can go onto iTunes, type in Backyard Professor, and you are off listening. If you want to do that with Dissident Daughters or Radio Free Mormon, do that. But you can also type in Mormon Discussion, and you should see this square that has the Mormon Discussion circle logo in the middle, and then several of our podcasts represented, not all of them, but several of our podcasts represented. And that will be the umbrella. If you've been listening to me long before we started taking on other podcasters, I think we took on Radio Free Mormon in 2015 or early 2016. And if you have been subscribed to our main channel that was just me back early in the day, that feed has turned into the umbrella feed intentionally. And now my feed is found separately. If you really like most of our content or all of our content, my 2 cents is just stay subscribed to the umbrella. But if you really find like half of our podcasts just aren't interesting to you, by all means, subscribe to any one of those podcasts separately. So there's that. Okay, I think that does it for the screen share stuff. Last thing I wanted to talk about is other things that we're doing and ways that we could use your help. Things that we're doing, local events. We've been doing local events here and there over the course of the last 2 years. And those comprise of several things. One is that whenever anyone locally here in Southern Utah reaches out to me, I always volunteer to take them to dinner and to have a conversation and to sit with them and to give them a chance to tell their story, to offer support, to talk to them, to let them know the things they're thinking about in deconstructing that they're not alone. We also have had get-togethers, little parties or meetups. We've done a bowling activity a couple of times. We've had get-togethers at my home. And just starting this year, we're trying to be more formal about that. So March 25th is a get-together at my house, and all the costs are taken care of by the podcast, but it's an open invitation to anybody we put it in the Southern Utah Post-Mormon Support Community Facebook group. And if anybody is anywhere else nearby and you want to show up, come. If you work with the Strengthening Church Members Committee and you'd like to show up at the party, we really don't want you there, but I expect you'd show up anyway and just tell us you're somebody else. So, but by all means, we'd love to have folks show up. And our job there is to help essentially give people a place to meet others and to have friends and to get a sort of fellowship and to have a sort of community. By the way, I'm super thrilled with what Thrive is doing. And I know that John DeLynn and Mormon Stories have gotten some constructive or not constructive criticism lately through the Salt Lake Tribune and other places. But I think Thrive is amazing. And knowing those folks personally, I'm quite proud of the work that they're doing. And so this isn't Thrive, but this is local meetups. We've done presentations. We've gone places to do things as well. We've gone to Thrive in Salt Lake City last year. Radio Free Mormon and myself went. RFM went to Seattle to speak. I went to the Las Vegas Thrive to speak. If you want us to do things, we would love that. We would love the chance to go somewhere and spend a weekend doing workshops or to come and give a presentation. You simply need to reach out to us. Our email is Mormon Discussions Podcast. So Mormon, singular, discussions, plural, podcast, plural, @gmail.com. And if you don't know to remember that, you can just go to the umbrella page of mormondiscussions.org, click the Contact Us button, and you will see Contact Us. Oop, for some reason, that didn't work. Let me, well, I got something to fix today. Anyway, Mormon Discussions Podcast @gmail.com is how you would email us. So we meet with people individually. We try to have get-togethers at my home and in other places. We try to make it safe for people to ask the podcasters under us to go to some place and do presentations. Radio Free Mormon was out here, I think, twice last year in Southern Utah, speaking to folks out here. I've gone places before to speak. I think I was in Vegas once last year to do something, and there was one other trip I made. And so we welcome that, by the way. We'd like to increase the number of events that we do. And one of the things we're going to do just in the last couple of weeks we've been working on it is to be part of Discord. And so we are working with a Discord channel that already exists. And we're going to allow our umbrella to participate there with those folks. And the thing that we're going to do, I think, first is I'm going to host a game night of Moral Dilemma, the card game, which puts you into a Sophie's choice of two choices that are uncomfortable. You can't change the situation. You can't add extra details or take details away. You're presented two choices, and you simply have to pick one. And what comes out from this conversation, it's a game. We'll have some laughs. It'll be fun. But what also comes out from this game is you realize that morality from human to human is very different. And how any one of us negotiates what is ethical, what is right, what we would do, what we would not do. It becomes interesting because you realize why humans make the choices that they do. So yeah. Bill Reel and Mormon Discussions is an excellent addition to Mormon Stories and a bunch of other excellent Mormon podcast and YouTube channels. Again, just to note, we are not Mormon Stories. They are a completely separate entity, but we do collaborate every once in a while, and I consider John a friend, and I think he's doing great work, but we are separate from them. But I think that's what you mean by that we are a great addition. to the available podcast and content that's out there on Mormonism, helping people deconstruct. So there's that. So hopefully if you participate in Discord, you'll want to look out for that. We'll announce it in various places prior to it happening, but we'd love to have you on there. And it doesn't matter if it's 5 people, 10 people, 50 people. I think it'll be a fun game to play, and each of us will get a chance to kind of see how crazy nuanced morality is from human being to human being. Now, where we can use your help, we'll wrap up here. We would love to be more dynamic and more visible and more functional with events. We'd like to make it so that our podcasters have the chance, and you have the chance to ask them to be part of something somewhere and to speak somewhere and to do various events and go to places. So again, you can email us if you want a particular podcaster and you want to arrange for them to come to your area. The podcasters haven't said they would do that per se. I'm simply saying, let's start the conversation where we try to create events that those folks have a chance to broaden out their reach and their help to you, and that you would have access to them. Also on Discord, we hope at some point to have each of our podcasters maybe jump on for a half an hour, an hour, and have a conversation with you. We want to give them more visibility and help them have more reach. We'd love ideas for virtual events, such as the Moral Dilemma game. If there's a way to have some fun and build some community, we'd love to do that. Again, I work part-time now, so I'm available essentially full-time to be present where you need me to be present, to help and support you as listeners who are deconstructing high-demand fundamentalist religions and trying to reconstruct a healthy, productive life afterward. We would love help with graphics. We have a IT professional that assists us with all of our IT stuff behind the scenes. But if you have a particular skill where you could make our sites look incredibly, high end, we would welcome that. Last year I was working, and I know there was a gentleman who reached out to me, and we did talk a couple of times about doing such. I lost that contact information. So if you're listening to this, please reach out again. But if somebody wants to take on one of these websites and update it and make it look beautiful beyond what it is. So for instance, if we go to Radio Free Mormon, his website is pretty basic. If somebody knows how to come in there and just make it look vibrant and dynamic, we would love that. It serves the purpose for us as it is, but we would welcome improvements. So there's that. We'd love for you to share the podcast. Folks, in this space, when you're deconstructing Mormonism, you and justifiably so, by the way, you're fearful of sharing anything you're discovering with people around you. Hence, in this space, it's really difficult to reach believers, because if I'm listening to Radio Free Mormon and I'm deeply impacted by his material, I'm afraid to take that material to my family and friends in fear of being ostracized on some level by them. So for those of you who are in a position to share, it is so important that you share these podcasts with people. By the way, I was talking about Radio Free Mormon. There's his website. I forgot that I'd taken the screen share off. So it's a pretty basic website, and if anybody can help us with these, we would love that. I really don't want our IT guy doing that, because he really helps us keep everything running smoothly day to day. It really would take someone else who's got some free time and a desire to do that. But again, I think things are going great the way they are. If that interests anybody, perfect. If not, no sweat. Any help with graphics, again, sharing the various podcasts, please go on the YouTube channel, subscribe, like, upvote things when you see stuff. When we do our live show, hit the up button. If you see something on Reddit that we're publicizing, hit the upvote. We really want folks to help us continue to expose our content to folks who need it. And we have experienced dynamic growth year after year. And so I really appreciate folks who listen, folks who share the podcast, and the folks who donate. And you're really how all this happens. I started this back in 2012 all by myself and turned it into a nonprofit in 2014 because that's the year we started making money. And then 2015 late, 16 early, we brought on Radio Free Mormon, followed up by Marriage on a Tightrope, followed up by a few other podcasts that didn't survive, although I think their material's still out there. And then in the recent couple of years, we've just added a bunch more podcasts. And I think, again, I think we're offering a really cool array, a great lineup of material. And donations. The very last thing I would say is we really need donations. And it's how we survive. It's how we make our money to pay our overhead and to pay our podcasters to create content. It's how we do what we do. And so if Mormon Discussion and any of its podcasts are benefiting you, might you consider going on to any of those podcasts or just donating to the umbrella by going to mormondiscussions.org or clicking any one of the various podcasts and then click the donate button, and you will clearly see, for instance, on Radio Free Mormon's site, let me add it here. Any of the places you donate, you will see very clearly which entity you are donating to. If you go to the umbrella and click donate, you get to pick where your money goes. I still have to add the newer podcast under this, but you'll see that the ones that were up here are there. And so we will add the other ones here in the next couple of days so that you can donate to any of them. So you can donate just to the umbrella, but we put that as the last choice. We really want you giving to the podcasts that are most meaningful to you. If you simply like everything we're doing, then donate to Mormon Discussion Incorporated. But otherwise, pick the podcast that you are enjoying and getting the most benefit from. And that's really it, folks. I just 2021 had ended. 2022 was off to a great start. And I just simply wanted to share what we were doing and how you could connect with all the things that we were putting out, all the content that we're creating, and to also give some, to shine a light on the folks who are new with us, who are putting out really incredible content, and the folks who have been with us for a long time, who continue to put out great material. I just want to check the comments here before we close off. Somebody said set and lighting design would help a lot and would be super cheap. Thank you, by the way. I am in contact with a supporter of our podcast who approached me. I didn't approach them. He approached me and said, Bill, we've got to improve your video and lighting. And so that should be something that happens here really soon. I do have extra lights plugged up that I sometimes turn on to give a little bit more lighting on the shadow sides of my face. But part of it is they put off a ton of heat. And so I'm a little bothered sometimes when they're on. Other comments, John DeLynne's Mormon Stories podcast improved a lot with simple lighting, better cameras. By the way, thank you. Again, we're working on that. One of the strengths of Bill Reel and RFM is their careful, respectful tone. Active Latter-day Saints can listen to this stuff if the tone is mature and kind, which it is. DeLynne still interrogates folks. I'll say too, by the way, my tone has absolutely changed over the years. I was so soft when on the inside of the church because that's what's necessary to help. And at some point, I really just wanted to be more authentic. And so I sometimes can be a little gruff in my tone because I'm pushing back against what my brain tells me is absurd positions by the person that I'm in a conversation with. Sorry about that. But anyway, there's that. That seems to do it. Comments are there. If you have any questions, anything you want to ask or point out, please email us at Mormon Discussions with an S on the end, podcast with an S on the end @gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and